There's a truth most men only realize when it's already too late. They spend their lives chasing success, wealth, recognition only to discover they've lost something far more precious themselves. These are not lessons taught in school, not whispered at dinner tables, not celebrated in headlines. But centuries ago, ancient thinkers Confucius, Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi left behind quiet truths. Not to tell you how to live, but to help you remember what you once knew. This is not just a story. This is a mirror held up to your life. In a quiet corner of the world, away from the noise and rush of cities, there lived a man who had seen many seasons pass. His hair, once black like the raven's wing, was now a tapestry of silver strands. Time had touched his body, made his steps slower, but his eyes still held the fire of seeking, that unquenchable desire to understand life. He was not a scholar in the formal sense. He had never studied in grand halls, nor held books filled with theories. Yet life had been his greatest teacher. Each scar on his body, every wrinkle on his face, was a page written in the language of experience. He had loved, he had lost, he had fought, he had forgiven, and now, with years behind him and silence around him, a single question echoed in his heart: what truly matters? Not the kind of question you ask over dinner, or in passing moments. No, this was a question that came from deep within the bones, the kind of question that rises after decades of striving, when trophies lose their shine, and applause becomes faint. He looked around at the life he had built, the house with sturdy walls, the land he had worked, the children he had raised. He had done everything the world told him a man should do. Yet there was a strange emptiness, a stillness that was not peace but the quiet before an awakening. So he did something rare. He stopped, not for a moment but truly stopped. He stepped away from the noise, from the doing, from the proving. He took walks in the forest. He sat by rivers. He watched leaves fall and birds return to their nests. And slowly, as the world around him softened, something inside him began to speak. It was not a voice of ambition or regret, but a quiet whisper of reflection, and it said, "You've learned how to survive, but have you learned how to live?" That question hit him harder than any wound he had received in his youth, because survival, oh yes, he knew it well. He had clawed his way through poverty. He had endured betrayal. He had rebuilt after loss, but living, fully, deeply, consciously, living he wasn't sure, so he began again, not with a plan, but with presence. He became a student of life once more, and his teachers, not gurus or sages in robes, but the silent wisdom of the world, the old pine tree that had weathered storms without complaint, the mountain that did not chase the clouds but waited for them, to pass the river that bent around obstacles rather than break them. He remembered the old teachings his grandfather whispered under the stars, tales of Lao Tzu and Confucius, of wandering monks and humble farmers. Those stories, once bedtime rituals, now returned with new meaning. They were not just tales, they were maps. One night, sitting alone with a cup of warm tea, he wrote a single line in his notebook: "The tragedy of man is not that he dies, but that he forgets how to live before he does." From that moment, he began collecting the lessons he wished he had learned earlier, not to mourn the time lost, but to make use of the time that remained. These were not lessons from textbooks or quotes from wealthy men. These were truths whispered by old trees, sung by birds, and echoed in the silence of the night. He called them the unspoken teachings of time. Lesson 1. Slowness is power. In his younger days he believed speed was success. The faster he worked, the more he earned. The quicker he climbed, the more praise he received. But with speed came blindness. He missed the laughter of his children. He forgot the softness of his wife's voice. He chased deadlines and ignored sunsets down. Older and slower, he realized, slowness is not weakness. It is the space in which clarity is born. When you walk slowly, you see more. When you speak slowly, you mean more. When you eat slowly, you taste more. And when you live slowly, truly, you feel more. In stillness, he met himself again, not the man others saw, but the soul underneath the roles. And in that meeting there was peace. Lesson 2. Pain is a teacher in disguise. He had always tried to avoid pain, like most people do. He feared heartbreak, rejection, failure. But pain had a way of finding him anyway. And when it did, it tore down the illusions he had built so carefully. It stripped away the masks. But pain, he saw now, was not cruelty. It was a form of clarity. The heartbreak taught him where he had loved blindly. The betrayal taught him where he had trusted too quickly. The failure taught him that ego was a poor compass. Each wound was a window, and through those windows light entered. Without pain he would still be asleep. Lesson 3. People are mirrors. In his solitude he began to reflect on the people in his life. Friends, enemies, lovers, strangers, each one, in their own way, had reflected a part of him. The ones who irritated him showed his impatience. The ones who praised him fed his pride. The ones who hurt him revealed his sensitivity. Every encounter, he realized, was an opportunity not just to know others, but to know himself. Life was a mirror, and people were the reflections. Lesson 4. Enough is a sacred word. He had spent decades chasing more wealth, more status, more security. But more is a hungry ghost. No matter how much you feed it, it keeps asking. One morning, as he drank tea with no rush and watched the sky change colors, he whispered to himself, "This moment is enough. I am enough." It wasn't a declaration of giving up. It was a liberation when you stopped needing more. You start seeing what's already there. And so as the season turned and the winds changed, he continued walking this quieter, wiser path. He wasn't looking for answers anymore, only understanding, not chasing greatness but grace. He had begun again, not as a man trying to prove his worth, but as a soul remembering it. And this was only the beginning. As days passed, the man found a quiet rhythm in his new way of being. He no longer chased time, he walked with it. Each morning, before the world fully stirred, he would step outside with bare feet, feel the cool earth beneath him, and simply breathe, not with urgency, but with reverence. Nature had become his temple. In the gentle hush of dawn, the trees would whisper. Their branches swayed, not with drama but with quiet certainty, as if they knew something he was only beginning to understand. He listened not with ears but with his soul. He began to notice things he had never paid attention to before. The way sunlight filtered through leaves, like stained glass. The way birds sang not to impress, but simply because they were alive. The way the breeze never forced itself, it simply arrived, and left in this soft unfolding of life. He began to remember something he had long forgotten, that wisdom, it is not taught, it is remembered, that we are born knowing how to live. We forget in the noise, and if we are lucky, life gives us silence to remember again. Lesson 5. The ego is a loud guest in a quiet room. He recalled a time, years ago, when he walked into every room with a need to be noticed. He would speak loudly, laugh forcefully, and constantly assert his worth through titles, through stories, through polished appearances. But now, as he watched the world with older eyes, he saw the truth. The ones who truly know don't need to speak loudly. The strongest trees don't rush to grow. The ocean doesn't boast, yet it holds the world. He saw that much of his striving had come not from passion, but from insecurity wearing the mask of ambition. The ego had built a throne inside him, a throne made of comparison and fear. But the throne was empty now, because he no longer needed to sit on it. He didn't need to win anymore. He needed to be. Lesson 6. Doing nothing is not a waste. It is a return. In a world obsessed with productivity, he had always feared stillness. Rest felt like laziness. Pause felt like weakness. Every moment had to be filled with emails, meetings, achievements, improvements. But the forest taught him something different. Trees do not grow all year. The moon does not shine every night. Even rivers slow in the dry season. Nature rests not out of failure but out of wisdom. He began to carve out time to do nothing. No phone, no tasks, just presence, just being. And in those empty spaces something unexpected happened. His mind softened. His heart reopened. His spirit stretched its legs. He realized that doing nothing is not the opposite of growth. It is the soil where growth begins. Lesson 7. The past is a place to visit, not to live. Sometimes, in the silence of evening, old memories would knock on the door of his heart. Mistakes, regrets, words he wished he hadn't said, moments he wished that had gone differently for many years. He had lived inside those memories, replaying them like old films, hoping to change the ending. But they never changed. They only drained him until one night, while watching the stars, he whispered, "You are not my prison, you are my teacher." From that moment he no longer lived in the past, but he visited it like a wise elder. He took what it offered, bowed in gratitude, and returned to the present. Because the past cannot be changed, but it can be understood. And understanding sets us free. Lesson 8. Not every battle is worth fighting. He had wasted so much energy arguing, proving, correcting. He had fought over being right. He had defended his pride like a fortress. But over time he learned, some arguments win nothing but loneliness. Some victories cost too much peace. Some hills are not worth dying on. He remembered a line from an old story. You can be right, or you can be at peace. It wasn't about surrendering to injustice. It was about choosing which wars mattered. And more often than not, the war wasn't outside, it was within. Lesson 9. Silence is the language of the soul. In his youth, silence made him uncomfortable. It felt awkward, heavy. He filled it with jokes, small talk, noise. Now, silence was his sanctuary. He would sit under the night sky, with nothing but the sound of crickets and wind, and feel more understood than in 1,000 conversations. Because, in silence, the soul speaks. In silence, the heart remembers. In silence, we meet ourselves and we are not strangers anymore. Lesson 10. True wealth cannot be measured. He had once believed wealth was in numbers in bank accounts, properties, assets. But as he looked at his old ledger of achievements, he asked, what is the worth of a sunrise? What is the value of a kind word? What price can you put on peace? He realized the richest man is not the one who has the most, but the one who needs the least. He began measuring wealth differently. In calm mornings, in shared laughter, in deep sleep without worry. That was real prosperity. And so, the man continued his quiet journey, walking not to arrive, but to be present. He did not preach. He did not claim to have all the answers. He simply lived as a living question, open, soft, learning. The mountains watched him pass. The rivers welcomed his reflection. The sky, vast and indifferent, mirrored his small but meaningful steps. He wasn't chasing meaning anymore. He was becoming it, and somewhere deep inside he knew. The journey had no destination. The path was the point, and walking it with eyes open, heart tender, and soul listening was the lesson itself. As the man walked further into this quiet life, something unexpected happened. He began to hear himself, not the voice of ambition or fear, but a deeper, softer voice that had waited patiently beneath all the noise. It was the voice of his soul. He hadn't heard it in years, not because it hadn't spoken, but because he hadn't known how to listen now. In the space between moments, between breaths, between thoughts, it whispered truths so simple they felt ancient. You are enough. You don't have to rush. There is no one to impress. Come home to yourself. Lesson 11. Busyness is a disguise for emptiness. He remembered how busy he used to be. His calendar was full, his inbox overflowing, but no matter how much he did, something always felt missing. He thought more action would fill the void. He thought success would quiet the hunger, but it never did now. As he sipped tea without a meeting to rush to, he saw clearly busyness isn't always productivity. Sometimes it's just distraction in disguise. A way to avoid the aching silence within. He realized it's not how much we do, but how deeply we live, and sometimes living deeply means doing less but feeling more. Lesson 12. Aging is not losing, it's becoming. As he watched the silver in his hair grow bolder, he did not feel shame, he felt honor. Each line on his face was a story. Each scar a lesson. He no longer envied youth. He pitied it for thinking speed was everything, for mistaking energy for wisdom. He had once feared growing older. Now he welcomed it like an old friend, because with age came depth. The eyes don't just see more, they see clearer. The heart doesn't just beat, it knows rhythm. The soul doesn't just survive, it sings. He understood. Youth is loud, wisdom is quiet. And he was learning to love the quiet. Lesson 13. Relationships are not meant to complete us but to mirror us. There were people he had loved deeply and lost painfully, not always through death, but sometimes through change. And for years, he thought those relationships had failed. But one day, while watching leaves fall effortlessly from trees, he whispered, letting go doesn't mean something was wrong. Sometimes it means it served its season. He saw now that the people who hurt him had also taught him, and the ones who left had made space for something better to grow. Not all relationships last, but all reveal. And that was enough. Lesson 14. Forgiveness is freedom, not agreement. He had held onto grudges like armor, believing they protected him from being hurt again, but they didn't protect. They poisoned. The longer he held on, the heavier they became. One evening, standing by a still lake, he dropped a stone into the water and watched the ripples. And in that simple moment, he let go of decades of resentment. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because he deserved peace. Forgiveness wasn't saying it was okay. It was saying, I won't carry this anymore. And in that release he found a kind of freedom no apology could ever give. Lesson 15. Pain is a portal, not a punishment. He no longer cursed his suffering. He bowed to it because he finally understood. Pain had not come to destroy him, but to open him, to carve out space for empathy, to soften his arrogance, to teach him where healing was needed. Every tear had watered a part of his soul that had grown dry, and looking back, he whispered with reverence, thank you, pain, you brought me to myself. Lesson 16. You don't have to know where you're going to keep walking. There was a time he needed a plan, a roadmap, a goal. He feared uncertainty. He hated not knowing. But now he found beauty in mystery. The path ahead was not lit, but each step he took revealed the next. He didn't need to know the destination. He only needed to trust the journey. Life is not a problem to solve. It's a mystery to live. And walking in trust felt better than running in fear. Lesson 17. Kindness is the most underestimated superpower. He once believed strength was in control, in domination, in power. But now he saw strength in the gentlest things, in choosing patience when anger was easier and offering softness when the world was harsh, in staying open when betrayal begged him to shut down. Kindness, he learned, is not weakness, it is courage, it is rebellion, it is the quiet revolution that changes everything. And every time he chose kindness, especially toward himself, something healed. Lesson 18. Presence is the greatest gift you can give. He no longer chased perfection, he chased presence. To be fully in a moment, not divided, not distracted, was the most sacred offering. He listened without interrupting. He held hands without checking his phone. He made eye contact like the other person mattered because they did. And in return, life gave him something money could never buy: real connection, real intimacy, real belonging, because presence is how love speaks. Lesson 19. You are not behind, you are becoming. There were days he still felt late, behind, like he should have arrived somewhere by now. But as he watched the moon rise slowly over the hills, he remembered nothing in nature rushes, and yet everything happens on time. He was not late. He was right on time for his own unfolding. Life wasn't a race. It was a bloom, and he was still blooming. Lesson 20. At the end, what will matter most is how gently you lived. As he sat beneath the stars one evening, older now, slower, but somehow fuller, he asked himself, if I had to do it all over again, what would I do differently? And the answer rose from within, soft but sure. I would rush less, I would listen more, I would love louder, and I would live gentler. Because in the end, it wasn't the achievements, it wasn't the status, it wasn't even the lessons. It was how he had walked through the world with open hands, an open heart, and open eyes, and that was enough. The older he grew, the more he began to recognize a strange pattern. Much of what he once chased so fiercely had brought him little joy, while the things he once ignored now shimmered with meaning. Fame, money, recognition, they had all seemed so vital, but the satisfaction they brought was like eating salt water. The more he drank, the thirstier he became. Now as he sat in the quiet, watching the golden light of sunset touch the earth, he finally asked himself the question that had evaded him for decades. What if I'd been running toward the wrong things my whole life? And just like that, the chase stopped. He was no longer a hunter, he became a gardener, tending to what was already here. Lesson 21. Success without peace is failure in disguise. He had once believed that success was the goal, that everything else would follow once he made it. He made it, and yet peace never came. Only when he walked away from the noise did he see the trap. The ladder he climbed so aggressively was leaning against the wrong wall. He learned that real success is not measured by applause or achievement. It's measured by how often you wake up with joy, go to sleep with gratitude, and spend the day with a calm heart. That, he realized, was success worth keeping. Lesson 22. What you own will eventually own you. He used to collect cars, clothes, properties, gadgets, trophies of a life well played. But somewhere along the line the joy faded, and the things began to feel heavy. It wasn't freedom, it was clutter. He saw that each new thing came with responsibility, maintenance, stress, and so, slowly, he began to let go. He sold what he didn't need, donated what he didn't love, and freed himself from the illusion that more was better. In the end, the less he owned, the lighter he felt. He hadn't lost anything, he had gained space. Lesson 23. The strongest people are the softest. He had always admired strength in posture, in voice, in presence, but he confused hardness with power. It wasn't until life broke him open, until grief bent him to his knees, that he discovered real strength. It wasn't in resistance, it wasn't surrender. The people who held him in his pain weren't the loudest or boldest. They were the quiet ones, the ones who knew how to sit in silence, the ones who didn't try to fix him, only to be with him. From them he learned, true strength is not about control, it's about compassion, and the softest hearts often carry the deepest resilience. Lesson 24. Nature heals what the world hurts. He stopped running from the woods, stopped fearing stillness. Instead, he began to walk among trees, not for exercise, not for photos, but for remembering. Nature didn't rush, it didn't compare, it didn't shout, it simply was, and that was enough. In nature he remembered how to breathe, he remembered how to be, and the more time he spent beneath the sky, the more his heart softened, because nature doesn't ask us to change, it only asks us to return. Lesson 25. Doing nothing is sometimes doing the most. He used to equate rest with laziness. Sitting still felt like failure, but burnout taught him otherwise. There came a day when his body said no, when even coffee couldn't carry him, when ambition crumbled beneath exhaustion. And in that collapse he discovered something miraculous. Rest is not a break from growth, it is part of growth. Doing nothing, he realized, isn't doing nothing, it's doing what matters most. Healing. So now, he schedules rest like meetings, he naps like it's sacred, and he honors his body like the temple it always was. Lesson 26. Life doesn't owe you clarity, only the next step. For years, he begged life to show him the whole map, to tell him what's next, to explain everything. But life never did. Instead, it offered only whispers, a pull toward, a conversation, a nudge to rest, a strange feeling to say yes. And over time he stopped needing certainty. He started trusting direction. The more he obeyed the gentle nudges, the more life opened. Not all at once, but enough. Because clarity is not a lightning bolt. It's a sunrise, slow, quiet, inevitable. Lesson 27. You teach people how to treat you. He had spent years being a people pleaser, saying yes when he wanted no, keeping peace at the cost of his own well-being. He believed this was kindness, but then he noticed something. The more he tolerated disrespect, the more it showed up, and so he made a quiet vow. I will no longer abandon myself to make others comfortable. He began to set boundaries, not with anger but with self-respect, and the people who truly loved him stayed. The rest drifted, and that was okay. Lesson 28. Grief is proof that you loved. He once avoided grief at all costs. He feared its depth, its darkness, its silence. But when it finally came, when someone he loved became only a memory, he sat with it. He didn't run. And in that sitting, he discovered something beautiful. Grief was not a punishment. It was proof of love. Every tear, every ache, every sleepless night They were not signs of weakness, they were sacred, and he honored them, because to grieve deeply means you have loved deeply, and what a privilege that is. Lesson 29. The real you is who you are when no one is watching. He had played many roles, the achiever, the provider, the entertainer, the strong one, but all masks grow heavy. And one day, in the quiet of solitude, he asked, "Who am I when no one needs me to be anything?" And he met himself, not the version with the smile, not the one who always had answers, just the one who was raw, honest, real. And in that meeting, he felt peace, because the truth was, he didn't need to become anyone, he just needed to return to himself. Lesson 30. Life isn't about getting somewhere, it's about becoming someone. All those years of chasing, proving, building, they weren't wasted, but they weren't the point. The point was the becoming, the transformation, the softening, the awakening. And now, with the sun setting on this season of life, he smiled, not because he had everything, but because he had enough. He had wisdom, he had peace, he had himself, and for the first time in forever, that was more than enough. There comes a time in a man's life when he stops looking sideways. He no longer measures his worth against the pace of others. He no longer lets envy hijack his peace. Instead, he looks inward, not to compare but to connect. He remembers that flowers don't bloom at the same time, that rivers don't race each other to the ocean, that greatness isn't loud, it's rooted. And with that shift, he finally begins to live. Not for approval, but for truth. Lesson 31. You don't have to prove yourself to be worthy. All his life, he had chased validation. From teachers, from bosses, from strangers on the internet. He thought worth had to be earned, that love had to be won. But then came a season where he had nothing left to prove, and strangely, he felt lighter. Hit him. Worth is not something you win, it's something you remember. He was worthy the moment he was born. He had simply forgotten. Lesson 32. The best conversations are the ones without words. He once filled every silence with noise. He feared the gaps, but then he sat by a river with a friend who said nothing, no small talk, no wisdom, which is presence, and it was the most healing conversation he'd ever had. He learned that not all connection requires dialogue. Some require only stillness, the kind that says, "I see you, I feel you, I'm here," and sometimes, that's all we ever need. Lesson 33. The most important promises are the ones you keep to yourself. He had broken many promises, mostly to himself. He had said he would rest, but he kept grinding. He had said he would walk away, but he stayed. He had said he'd speak his truth, but stayed silent. He realized the damage wasn't in the lie, it was in the erosion of trust, not with others, but within. So he started small. I will drink water, I will stretch for 5 minutes, I will say no. And with every promise kept, he rebuilt his self-trust. Brick by brick, word by word. Until he could finally believe himself again. Lesson 34. Discipline is the highest form of self-love. He used to think discipline was punishment. Rules, schedules, restrictions. But then he realized, discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. It's not about control, it's about care, caring enough about your future self to make sacrifices today. Waking up early not because you must, but because your dreams matter. Eating well not to look a certain way, but because your body is sacred. Resting not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. He saw that discipline wasn't the opposite of freedom, it was the path to it. Lesson 35. You can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. He once believed he could fix everything from within, that he could stay in the toxic job, the draining friendship, the noisy city, and still find peace. But healing, he learned, often requires separation. You can't find air if you never leave the smoke. So he left, not with drama, not with blame, just with a quiet knowing he deserved more. And as the noise faded, the healing began, not because everything was perfect, but because he was finally free to breathe. Lesson 36. True confidence is quiet. Arrogance is loud. He had met many who boasted they wore confidence like armor, heavy, clanging, desperate. But the ones who truly had it were quiet. They didn't need to dominate rooms or prove points. They listened more than they spoke. They made others feel seen because their power didn't come from being above others, it came from being fully themselves. He realized that real confidence whispers, "I know who I am. I don't need you to agree." Lesson 37. Rest isn't a reward, it's a right. He used to earn his rest. He thought he had to burn out before he could lie down. But the body doesn't wait for permission one day. It simply stopped. The fatigue wasn't mental, it was cellular. And so he relearned rest, not as a luxury but as a rhythm. He began to honor his limits, to pause before collapse, to breathe before burnout, because you don't need to prove your exhaustion to be worthy of peace. Lesson 38. Letting go is a skill you must practice. He held on too long, two people, two roles, two identities. He thought that letting go was giving up, but then he saw that clinging was the true loss. Holding on to what no longer served him took more energy than releasing it ever would. So he practiced letting go of grudges, of titles, of needing to be understood. And with each release, his hands opened, not in surrender, but in readiness, ready to receive what was waiting all along. Lesson 39. The things you fear are often portals to freedom. He avoided discomfort. He sidestepped conflict. He ran from risk. He buried his voice. But then he stepped through one fear. Just one. And something shifted. It didn't kill him. It freed him, so he stepped again each time. He grew until fear no longer ruled him, because the doorway to the life you crave is often guarded by the fear you avoid. Lesson 40. The journey is the destination. He had been trying to arrive at success, at enlightenment, at peace, but every time he reached a summit, another appeared until he realized there is no mountaintop. There is no final arrival, only the path, the steps, the moments, the journey itself, beautiful, unfinished, was the destination, and now he walks not to get somewhere but simply to walk at last. He stopped searching. For decades I had wandered through philosophies and books, through cities and jobs, through lovers and losses. He had chased meaning like a traveler chases the horizon, always ahead, always out of reach. But in the stillness of an ordinary morning with no goal in sight, it came to him not as thunder, but as a whisper. We're never lost, you are just not listening. Lesson 41. Joy is found in presence, not possessions. He used to think joy came from acquiring. He stacked trophies, titles, and things, and yet the joy was fleeting. That it came, it flickered, it vanished, until one quiet evening, while watching the sky change color, he laughed. Not because of something he owned, but because of something he saw, and more importantly, something he felt. Joy, he realized, was presence. To notice the wind, to hear the birds, to feel the weight of your own breath. And for the first time, he felt rich. Lesson 42. The more you know, the less you judge. In youth he had strong opinions. He saw the world in right and wrong, black and white. But the more he lived, the more he softened. He met the man who failed not because he was weak, but because he had no one to guide him. He met the woman who seemed cold, until she shared her grief. He learned that pain hides beneath performance, that people are not their worst state. And so, he judged less. He replaced certainty with curiosity, anger with compassion. Because wisdom doesn't shout, I know better. It whispers, I understand more. Lesson 43. Some people are meant to walk with you only a while. He once believed that love meant forever, that every friend should stay, that every bond must last. But seasons changed, paths diverged, hearts outgrew one another, and it hurt until he learned. Just because it ended, doesn't mean it failed. Some souls are chapters, not endings. They shape you, stretch you, awaken you, then move on, and that's okay. The beauty was real, even if the forever wasn't. Lesson 44. True wisdom is gentle. He had met many who claimed to be wise. They spoke in riddles. They demanded reverence, but the truly wise, they were simple, quiet, unimpressed with themselves. They didn't teach, they lived. Their lessons weren't in speeches, but in presence. How they listened, how they forgave, how they smiled at the sky. He realized, wisdom isn't how much you know, it's how much peace you bring. Lesson 45. You are not too late. He often feared he missed his moment, that others had found their purpose early, while he was still fumbling. But then he met a painter who didn't touch a brush until she was 60. A writer who published his first book at 72, a man who fell in love for the first time at 85, and he realized the timeline was never the point. You are not behind, you are simply becoming. In your own way, in your own rhythm, in your own time, and that is more than enough. Lesson 46. Gratitude is the most transforming force in the universe. He had searched for answers in the stars, in scriptures, in systems, but the key was always one word: thank you. Thank you for the mornings, thank you for the breath, thank you even for the pain, which taught him depth. Gratitude turned scarcity into sufficiency, turned routine into wonder, turned survival into joy. It didn't change his life, it changed how he saw his life, and that changed everything. Lesson 47. You're allowed to begin again, no matter how many times you've fallen, no matter who walked away, no matter how long you've been silent. You can begin again, not from scratch, but from experience. With the lessons, with the scars, with a soft strength that only comes from surviving. You are not broken, you are becoming. And every sunrise is proof life begins again, every single day. Lesson 48. Life is not a problem to solve, but a mystery to embrace. He once treated life like a puzzle, every moment a riddle, every setback a flaw. But slowly he saw that life wasn't a test to pass, it was an experience to live. Not everything has an answer, not everything needs one. And the more he let go of needing to understand it all, the more he felt at peace with it all. Mystery wasn't confusion, it was wonder. Lesson 49. Love, true love, is what remains when everything else is gone. Not romance, not fireworks, but quiet, unconditional love. The kind that sits with you in the dark, the kind that stays when success fades, the kind that says, I see you, even when you're not impressive. This love didn't come with conditions, that it came with presence. And it was all he had been searching for, not in others, but in himself. Lesson 50. The end is also the beginning. He thought this was the end of youth, of adventure, of becoming, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of something deeper, a life not driven by achievement but by alignment, not by proving but by peace. He no longer needed to be extraordinary, he just needed to be real, to live with heart, to walk with presence, to leave the world just a little more gentle than he found it, and that was enough.